And so, when freedom is the priority, then the focus is always being the presence of being. When freedom is the priority, the focus is presence, being the presence that is. Because when the priority is freedom, nothing else matters. When the only desire is for freedom, freedom from the mind, freedom from the inner story, freedom from distraction and protection. When the focus is truly aligned with this being a priority, and nothing else matters. And when nothing else matters, there's freedom. Freedom is being the presence that is not being pulled as attention in various directions. Freedom is being the presence that is utterly present here now, just simply being. And there's nothing that needs to be done. There's nothing that needs to be changed about this moment. There's nothing to do. It is just about noticing that presence is here. And when the pull of the heart is so truly for freedom, then presence is no longer distracted by anything else, because the pull, the focus, brings the attention to presence, brings a natural vigilance, brings a natural presence of attention that is just simply being. Cannot decide with the mind that the priority is freedom. It is decided in consciousness itself that there is a readiness, there is a maturing, where the focus is drawn to freedom. And really, as these words speak, they are just speaking to invite the mature and ready consciousness to be drawn forward, to be enlivened for the fire for freedom, the fire for this truth to be enlivened. Every being has this longing, this desire within, because it is already the truth of every being. And it is about when does presence start to focus solely upon itself? Because the burning pull, the burning longing for freedom is so strong. Where the life starts to just not hold the same kind of interest, all of the ways of distracting and finding pleasure don't hold the same kind of interest, because being the being and being the presence of being is such a strong pull. And when there is this strong pull and this longing, then the consciousness itself creates exactly the right situation to support itself, brings us into the right company, the right guidance, the right support. And of course, none of this is personal. It's a completely impersonal unfolding within the unlimited field of consciousness that is naturally wise, naturally intelligent, and is carrying itself into itself, drawing itself in, calling itself in. And so there is so much about being openly receptive, being the openness. The natural openness is the aware field of being that is naturally receptive. Awareness is naturally receptive, just being aware, open and aware. And so much is about listening, and a deep, true listening where there is no listener. There's just this open receptivity, which is a natural receiving, a natural listening. And this is presence. This is the listening presence. And so instead of wanting, instead of the mind chatter that wants, the attention shifts to the true prayer, which is the open listening. And instead of talking and the mind activity being the functioning priority, there's this openness to receive and this natural listening, which is just open and receptive and just patiently here as presence, waiting for the great glory to shine, ready to receive the glory when nothing else is wanted. The glory comes. Because it is always here. The glory, the divine wholeness, God is always here. It's all there is. So how could it not be? And so it's this open receptivity that listens naturally, receives naturally, and in the settling out of the mind consciousness, the open field is ready to receive what's truly here. The presence, just simply present to its own presence, is ready to receive itself, ready to receive the glory, ready to receive the light that is the truth, to receive the being the living truth. So there is nothing that the mind can do. It is just about being, coming to the presence and registering, acknowledging the longing, acknowledging that all and any desire in truth is desire for freedom. It's a desire for yourself. And when it is recognized that the only true desire, the only true longing is just to be yourself, the freedom of just being yourself, not playing the game of being someone, letting go of protection and control, letting go of holding a position, letting go of knowing, letting go of acquired knowledge, second-hand knowledge, and just simply being the openness that always is. There's nothing to do, there's nothing to change. There's nothing to work out. It is just about simply being. Because as we come to the presence of being, there is a fullness here, a wholeness here, in the openness. The openness is openly receiving itself, openly receiving the presence, openly receiving the glory of just simply being. And this is here in the silence, in the simple silence of being. There is a naturalness here. It is a relaxation that brings us to a naturalness. And so we start just as the felt sense of being, felt sense of just simply being here. The recognition of presence, the recognition of the I am presence that just simply is, and that there's nothing to do, there's nothing to understand, there's nowhere to get to, and there's no one to be. It's just about being here. And the openness of the moment includes everything. It's not about changing anything. It's not about trying to create an environment that the mind imagines is spiritually conducive. It's about an open allowance and acceptance that just is so present here. And it doesn't matter what is going on. It's about being here. And in the being here, there is an awareness that is simply aware of the moving, changing. And even if we start just being aware of the moving, changing, watching the thoughts that come and go, watching the sensations and the sense perceptions that are constantly changing, and not trying to alter a thing, just simply watching. Just through watching, there is a sense of being the being that is watching, being the aware being that is watching. And naturally, the aware being starts to notice, being aware, being the presence of being. There's a watching the moving, changing, but in the watching of the moving, changing, the being itself starts to recognize its own freedom from the moving, changing. The being itself starts to recognize that it is still unmoving, unchanging, and natural. And the being is not thinking about what it is. It's just a naturalness that can seem to be in the background that starts to be recognized, to be more dominant, more noticeable. And it is the being itself that is present to its own beingness and recognizing that there is a beingness that is untouched and unchanged, that is watching the moving, changing landscape, watching the sense perception, but is not in and of itself touched in any way. We could say that the presence of being is standing alone somehow and just is. The being itself knows itself through just being itself. It knows itself through the natural belonging to itself, through naturally being itself. So we're not creating anything that is not here. And this is the curious thing, that the mind imagines that there's somewhere to get, something to achieve. But it's just like you're already sitting on a chair, right? It's like that you already are the being, just like you're already sitting on a chair. If we started creating a whole big hoop-de-ha about try and find a chair, sit on a chair, sit on a chair. How do I sit on a chair? Where do I find a chair? And then you realize, oh, I'm already sitting on a chair. It's like that. We have to just let go of the hoop-de-ha that the mind creates, imagining that there's somewhere to get to, something to achieve. And in just simply being, the being recognizes, oh, I'm already being. There's an innate naturalness to just being. And there's a simplicity that is so close, closer than anything can be close, closer even than the breath can be close. We could even say closer than the imagining of life. Your life force can be close. It's closer. It's closer because there's no thought about it. There's no interceptor. There's no in-betweeny. There's no path. There's not even a breath between you and yourself. You are the space between things. You are the space between breaths. You are the space between words. You are the space between everything. And the space is this pause, this openness, this infinite, unbounded field between everything you already are, between all the imaginings of what you are desiring, between all the imaginings of what techniques it might take, between all of the imaginings, all of the myths, all of the narrative. You already are everything that is longed for. And it is quite simply just to be here. It is quite simply just to follow the longing without longing for anything. Be in the felt sense of the longing or the desire without desiring something. Just in the rawness, the raw aliveness of the longing, in the raw aliveness of pure desire. And a pure desire is when there is only one desire, and that desire is to know yourself. And that desire is for freedom from the mind so that you can be yourself. And so in the felt sense of just recognizing that this desire is present, not even giving space to the mind that says, well, I don't even really have the desire for that. If the desire was not here, you would not desire anything, right? Whatever there is an imagining that desire is for, love, relationship, money, stability, new things, experiences, happiness, even the words of freedom or God. When there is a releasing of the desire for something, the recognition is that desire is here. And in a way, desire in and of itself is pure, because desire in its purity is the alive momentum of the longing. It is the kirtan call of God, putting out the call. And it is about singing the response. It is about this remembering of union, remembering that there are not two. And so it is to just recognize that the sense of desire is that you are being called, you are being pulled, you are not choosing to desire, you are not choosing to have a longing. You are being pulled by the natural momentum of life living itself and surrendering into itself. You are being called, you are being pulled by the natural momentum in consciousness to know itself, to know its wholeness, to know its divinity, and to know that it is not a somebody, or as someone with a story, but that what consciousness is a pure, impersonal, unlimited field. And it is just in a natural momentum to know its own wholeness. And that really what all of this is in truth, and what you are in truth, is consciousness and a natural flow of intelligence that is this natural momentum to know yourself, to be pulled into yourself, and to remember the simple truth of who you are. That there's nothing to do, there's nothing that can be done. It is all about just being the being and recognizing that it's all happening naturally, and that you already are the being, just as you are already sitting on the seat. The seat is like the seat of truth, or we could say it is like the ocean, the true ocean of bliss, the ocean of bliss consciousness. And you are imagining that you are parched and desperate for water. And it's just realizing that you are the water that you are dying for, that you already are everything that you are longing for. And it is just the simplicity of the relaxation and just being here now. So as these words come, it is all about the resonance, all about the frequency of recognition. It's not about understanding the words, and it's not about following any kind of instruction or conceptualizing. It's not about the words. It's about where the words are coming from and where the words are pointing to. This form is just a pointer. It's just a vehicle that is pointing you in a way to realign the compass so that you can feel the resonance of your own presence and be here and be in the illumined recognition of your own presence, that you can remember the truth of who you are and be in the joyful light of your own blissful nature. But it is to come empty of any wanting, come empty of any concepts and ideas, come completely empty to this moment. Know nothing, be no one, just be here, just as you are, just as the presence of being that has always been just a simple presence. Be here as yourself, be the openness, be the freshness, be the listening. Let the attention drop naturally into being the awareness, the aware presence that is simply aware of just being here, that nothing else is needed. Does not even matter if mind is thinking. If mind is thinking, just to be aware of mind thinking, just the simple noticing. It's not to try to stop the mind. It's not to change anything. It's to be that which is already here as the natural allowing openness. To be yourself, to remember, and in the remembering, recognize the glorious light of your own being, the simple bliss of just being yourself, being the wideness, being the openness that is vast, infinite and boundless, that knows itself, is entirely still and silent, abiding in itself, natural abidance in itself. The being just naturally being, natural, simple abidance, just being here. That the being has never been anything other than itself, and that you are the being, not the person, not the character, not the dreamer, not the dream. That you are the being, the wide open, boundless, infinite, eternal, presence that is timeless, natural, and just simple, simply being here. As we come to the stillness of presence, the still presence of being, there's a natural relaxation, a natural sense of expansion. But it's not the being that is expanding. It is the contracted sense of being the individual that is releasing and expanding into remembrance. So the sense of expansion is the sense of remembering freedom. It's the sense of remembering being the presence of being and not being the contraction, not being the story or the narrative, not being someone, but being the simple silence, ever present, ever free. And this is the natural resonance. It can be that the silence is like a pulse, a frequency, a silent sound, the resonance, the vibration, the frequency, this depth of knowing, of just simply being. It starts to feel thick and substantial in its depthfulness, because it is. But it's not a thing. Its substance is bliss. Its substance is just itself. There's nothing here. There's no one here. There's just a wide open field. And the field is empty of content, empty of sense perception. And it allows there to be a simple remembering of the openness and the naturalness of being. Nothing needs to happen. Nothing needs to change. It's just about recognizing and allowing there to be a natural focus. We could say, as we open to being the being, the sense of being becomes more of an intensified focus, because it's very compelling for the being to be itself, because it's true and it's everything that is longed for. And so as the being recognizes its beingness, as consciousness recognizes itself consciously awake and aware of itself, there's like a compelling pull into itself. And this compelling pull into itself is this natural draw that creates a intensification of the focus of presence, being present with itself. And it brings a clarity of vision, a clarity of seeing, a clarity of knowing. And then there's this peace, this abiding peace, this silence, this stillness, this sense of freedom, sense of being everywhere, being the openness, just simply being yourself. So there is nothing to do to rest here. The mind would like to grab on, and it wonders, well, how can I stay here? But you've always been this. You didn't just arrive here. You've always been this. This truth has always been here. You didn't just discover something new. You just remembered that you already are. So remembering that you already are, because you didn't arrive, you can't leave. You've always been this. You've never been anything else but this. And so it is just to be this, to be yourself, Be the being that just is. It is to recognize as the being itself, confirming the innermost beingness deep within the silence of being, the naturalness of the knowing of the being that knows itself through being itself. And it is just to rest here, just to rest here. There is a knowing here. And as the knowing deepens, the knowing is recognized to be very alive and flowing within itself. There is an aliveness. Sometimes the sense of the aliveness of the longing will bring us directly to the aliveness of the dynamic silence of being. Just a knowing that knows itself. But this knowing that knows itself is flowing within itself. And this is the flow of life, life flowing. And you are this life. You are life flowing. You're not doing life. You're not controlling life. You're not organizing life. Life is just living itself. So the great glory is that you can just let go of any ideas that you are doing anything, controlling anything, that you need to set any intentions or organize anything. It's all just happening. It's about watching, just watching as the awareness, as life lives itself. And watching as the awareness, as life lives itself, it starts to free all of these tendencies to imagine that you can control and contrive and use the conditions and protections to create a kind of separate haven for the me. Because the thing is that the separate haven that the me creates out of protection, it doesn't feel like a true haven. It doesn't feel like freedom. It feels like misery, because there's a constant feeling of lack, that something's missing, of not being enough, of somehow you're going to be found out as having done something wrong. And so when the me is really strong in its control and protection, it might feel satisfied that it's trying to hold it all together. But the felt sense will not be of freedom and happiness and love and openness and welcoming and companionship and interconnectedness, right? The true sense of just open, joyful interconnectedness that is the oneness, the majesty of sameness, only is present when we are alive as life, flowing naturally, not when we are protecting and controlling. And so in a way, protection and control are a natural marker that resistance is playing. And feeling stressed and anxious or fearful, wanting, desiring for the me, it doesn't feel comfortable because it's not true happiness. And there's a constant attempting through tension to control and manipulate the moment to be a pleasurable moment for the me. We know when we are in openness and freedom because we're not trying to manipulate the moment. We're not trying to create pleasure. We're not trying to fill the space with something else good that the me would enjoy. We're just present and watching and surprised at the spontaneous happenings of life as they come in. And it doesn't matter what they are. It doesn't matter in any way what comes in, because there's no attempts to control. And we're really moving in the flow of life, as the flow of life, in this perpetual surrender of life into itself, surrendering into itself, in order to know itself as the one and only, as the all, that the constant surrender of life into itself is the natural momentum of consciousness being pulled into itself intelligently, wisely, to illuminate itself as being only one, as being pure, as being untainted, undisturbable, as being divine wholeness. So this natural momentum is happening. And when there's a total allowing of life to live itself without resisting, we're actually right at the front of the game. We're in pole position and we're just receiving whatever comes, right? We're not lagging behind and watching all of our companions as they just keep busting through whatever comes. We're not lagging behind, controlling. We're not needing to cut ourselves off and create separation and division. We're open and just allowing the grace of life, whatever it brings is the grace of bringing the gift of consciousness meeting itself in whatever configuration it chooses, and the knowing in the knowing of being that it's completely impersonal and that you are the unlimited impersonal being, and that as soon as control and protection starts to happen, then there is a me that is moving in these patterns of limitation and the personal, and that this whole call for freedom is about seeing through the patterns of personal and limitation and opening to remember the impersonal unlimited. And so we have to be so aware as well of giving with one hand and taking back with the other. And what we mean by that is that we can be very full of the idea that this is all that we are longing for. It's all I want. It's all I want. And yet the words come and then we take it right back, right? We give it with one hand and we take it right back with the other by shutting down and controlling and holding a position. And so it doesn't matter. None of it matters. Nothing matters. It only matters to the one that's suffering. It only matters to the one that is divided. It doesn't matter to the glory. But the momentum of the glory, the momentum of the flow, is to pull everything into the glory, to give every being that wishes for freedom a fulfillment of the wish, that every being that desires freedom, that will be given, it will be granted. How could it not be? But what it looks like is having to meet the protections and controls and mechanisms of the me that wants to keep the me safe, right? Life will bring every possibility to see through. And so we, of course, have to have the willingness as the aware being, the natural willingness to illuminate how these patterns are playing in the life. Because where we're speaking that all we are longing for is freedom, that this is all that matters, and then we take it right back with the other hand, we can start to blame seeming others. We can start to blame the external and miss what is happening in the functioning is that there is protection playing, and there is never anyone else to blame. And that is why such an important part of this unfolding is the ability to take absolutely holistic, integral responsibility for everything that happens in life, to recognize that impersonally, as consciousness, as intelligence, you are creating all of the circumstances of the life perfectly, and that it's impersonal. And even if the mind imagines that it's personal, you can illuminate the imagining and the protections in order to dissolve them, in order to see through them, in order to illuminate the delusions of the mind and all of the holding patterns, that really there is nothing to do ever. It's about being the being and saying yes, a great big holy yes to life, living itself in every moment. It's not about the buts and the shoulds and the me's that want this or want that. It's about giving with one hand and just letting go, right? It's about saying, yes, this is all that's longed for. If this is truly all that's longed for, don't take it back with the other hand that says, yeah, but it's got to work for me, right? Just to notice how easy it is to give the holy yes and then take it right back again with in the next moment, because it's got to work for me, right? That's really just constantly saying to God, all I want is God, all I want is God, but it's got to work for me, God. You've got to, but you can't know God if there's a me, because the me is the barrier that imagines that God is at any distance. And it's the seeing through the me that doesn't really exist. The me is the mind that is self-obsessed and absolutely full of self-importance and imagining that my life and the things I have to do are really important. When we really long for this freedom, we realize that nothing matters but this freedom. We don't know how long we have in these human bodies. It doesn't matter what age we are. We do not know how long we have. This life is for freedom, friends, and for nothing else. We do not know how long we have, and this life is for freedom. What will stop us realizing and saying yes, right? It doesn't need to look like anything. You can be right where you are. You don't have to go anywhere. You don't have to do anything, but let your yes be almighty, right? Let your yes to God, to this truth, to freedom, be almighty. Don't give with one hand and take back with the other, or at least be aware of where you are, because only when there's an illumination of how this happens do we recognize how we are absolutely responsible for creating our own obstacles to freedom, that no one else is creating them, that we're creating our own obstacles, and that God is here, you are here. Nothing else is needed. If God is here and you are here, and there's a pull for freedom, then you've got the recipe for freedom right here. So what is stopping you cooking up a storm and just dancing in the almighty holy yes, right? Because God is here and you are here. And if the longing for freedom is here, then the ingredients to make the absolute remembering illuminated glory shine in its absolute radiance, it's all here. So let it shine, let it shine. Let there be nothing more than the shining radiance of the wide open heart that is saying yes, that the invitation to shine in and as the glory of being yourself in utter freedom is always here. Nothing is obscuring it but your own mind's projections of a me and a world that the me thinks is important. Nothing matters. Nothing matters. And in this moment here now, it is to feel the felt sense of being the being and confirm in your own wisdom light that nothing matters. There is nothing else here. Without a thought, without a story, there's nothing else here. And it's to fall into the confirmation, the recognition, the knowing of this freedom. That freedom is here. You are here. God is here. And the glory is shining. It is to turn wholeheartedly towards the light and let the natural illumination happen where the remembering of your true essence nature is. It's this abidance. It's this being yourself. And it's not about the mind confirming it. It's not about the mind measuring it. It's not about the mind saying, well, this is where I am and this is what I don't see. It doesn't matter. You are where you are. And wherever there's a resonance of truth or recognition, remembrance in this moment, it's just to be the remembrance, right? It's about being exactly where you are and recognizing that you are the stillness, you are the silence, you are the presence of being. You do not have to go anywhere, do anything. You already are utter freedom. And to confirm it in the presence of being, that there is a wholeness, a sense of wholeness that is the unlimited, undivided, and that you are that. You already are that. Mm. Mm. What stops anything in its natural momentum is the obstacle of the mind imagining that there is some kind of obstacle. There are no obstacles. It is an infinite field of possibility. And what we are is the aliveness of life surrendering into itself, which is pure potentiality. God can create anything in any moment, right? It's not the way that we imagine that it is with the mind, but we have to let go of the imaginings of the mind, the fears, the doubts, all of the stories and the narratives, buying into the collective narrative of scarcity, of lack, of not enough, right? We have to see through how bought in we are and how we collaborate with the collective narrative of limitation, lack, and separation. In truth, there is no lack, limitation, and separation. There never, ever has been. And the more that we live in a wild, unabandoned freedom of the infinite possibility, the more that we are in the flow, where we're not clinging on to things that the me thinks that it needs, that we're just giving it all to God, that we don't need to hold on to anything, that we give it all to God and we're given everything that we need, because nothing ever belongs to us. There's a natural flow of abundance. We are the flow of abundance because the flow of abundance is the flow of life. The being that just gives it all, gets it all. The mind will never, ever be able to understand because there has to be a complete surrender to God, a complete surrender that gives it all. And then you recognize that you get it all. Because nobody owns any of it. There is no scarcity. There's a natural abundance. And the more we cling, the clinging, the grasping, the grabbing on is all protection. It's all the me that imagines. It's all division. It's all limitation. How can we be free when we are holding in these kind of patterns, right? So this is where we just have this incredible grace to illuminate within our own internal functioning. Where is there a giving with one hand and a taking back with the other? Where do we speak of? Where do we speak these words and then take it back through our actions, right? We have to follow through all the way. Words mean nothing if they are not followed with action. We can ramble on as much as we want about this is all we want, this is all we want, this is all I want, this is all I want. But if the action doesn't follow, it's absolutely futile. It's a waste of breath, right? It means nothing. It means nothing. So in a way, this is where, as they say, the rubber hits the road, right? Within this unfolding is that words mean nothing. No words mean anything. It's about being the living surrender, being the flow, being everything that you are longing for, because it's here, right? Not being the story of lack, not being the story of limitation, not being the story of control and protection, right? It's just to notice within your own functioning how this is playing out. And there's a play of life that happens in order to bring it forward, right? It's not about anything. It's not about anything happening in the way that we imagine. It's a play. The whole thing is a play that is only here to illuminate in your internal functioning, where you are playing small and limited and separate, where you imagine that you're longing for freedom and you are blocking yourself, you're creating obstacles for yourself. It's not about the play. It's not about the story of the me having more experiences. The play is playing purely and only to set you free, right? And so in every moment, it's this opportunity not to imagine a future, not to project yourself into a story of experience, but in this moment, are you a living, glorious, shining, almighty yes? Are you resonating in this moment as a living, radiant, almighty yes to freedom? It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. You're not saying yes to anything. You're not saying yes to anyone. You're only saying yes to yourself, right? And this is what has to be seen, is that there is no future. There is no past. There is no experience. There's only the moment. And it's about this moment and what is happening in this moment, right? Everything is a play that's conspiring to invite you to watch yourself. Watch what happens, right? Watch what happens when you're invited into a holy yes. What happens? Do you go to the story of limitation? Do you go to protection and control? Or do you just allow, right? The almighty yes, because it's about being the almighty yes. It's not about the story, right? This is so integral to this unfolding, is that it's all a play. How many times can we say it's all a play? It's like a test. Everything is testing you to find out if your longing and the words that you speak are sincere. It's like the glory is testing your earnestness, right? It's testing your sincerity, right? In every moment. but you're not answerable to anyone but yourself. You're only answerable to yourself. It's about your inner functioning, what happens in the inner functioning, and being aware of what happens in your inner functioning. It's not about the play. It's not about experience. It's not about people. It's not about any of the things that your mind imagines it's about. It's about being a living, almighty yes in every moment, being in the abidance and the absolute openness of being yourself, being the majestic sameness and oneness with all beings in the one being, being in the interconnected field that is the openness of love, and not dividing yourself through your ideas, concepts, protections, and controls. It's about being the flow of life, flowing in and as itself, and watching to notice where you tread on your own flow, right? Where do you tread on the flow of your own life, your own freedom? Because this is so important so that we can see that we have absolute autonomous responsibility for our own freedom, right? God is here. You are here. If the willingness is here, there's nothing to stop the shining glory of this truth right now in this moment, shining. It's not in the future. It's not over there. It's not anywhere other than in your own inner knowing of yourself. Being the being that is ever present, ever free. And in the silent peace of being, the presence of being, there is a knowing that is a flow of life. And the knowing that flows is the being that knows itself. It's the awake field. And the awake field is in a perpetual surrender into itself. It's never holding a position. It's never holding itself back. It's just flowing as a field of awakened, illumined intelligence that knows itself. And all it needs for its absolute fulfillment is to know itself and to flow within itself. And then flowing within itself, it is a field of life which is ever abundant, ever free, ever open. And this is the field of unconditional love. And in the field of unconditional love, there is absolute belonging for all beings. There is love, there is connection, there is companionship, and like a natural togetherness in the being, right? There's an openness, a sincerity. There is a flow of grace that is life itself, flowing within itself. And we have to come to see that we are responsible for what is being lived. We have absolute responsibility for what is being lived, and that the protection and the control can create projection and stories and narratives about others, apparent others. But all of that is just a learned habit to protect. And it's about pulling in all of those projections, taking absolute responsibility. 100% responsibility is to align with the divine and to align with life surrendering into itself, and to align with that which intelligently knows how to live itself, and to be the flow of surrender, to let go and let God live through what you think you are. Live in absolute, flowing, glorious, radiant alignment, shining, happy, delighted, joyful, in constant wonder, love, and praise of the glory that is, in the light that is divinity, the light that is perfect love, right? This is what we are being invited into. And if our priority is for freedom from the mind's constriction, if our priority is freedom from the inner holding patterns that create the me and the mine and the projected world, if the longing is freedom from limitation, then freedom is here. You are here. God is here. It's all one. All that is needed is to open to the longing and to give with both hands the almighty yes, to give yourself to God, give yourself to divine wholeness, give yourself to freedom, and be this living, radiant, almighty yes. That you're not saying yes to anyone or anything, that you are either a living almighty yes, or you're living in separation and division of your mind's creating, right? So it's to illumine how the mind is creating that separation and protection of the me and the mine and the division, and to just illuminate for yourself. Because if you are longing for freedom, and if you are here, you are, illuminate how there's a giving with one hand and a taking back with the other. And that the misery is only experienced by the one that is in that cycle, right? The misery is not experienced by the glory, because the glory of God is still flowing, right? Life is still flowing. Nothing can impede the flow of the glorious, radiant, shining love. Nothing impedes true happiness. Nothing impedes true love, right? But if you are blocking your own access to what you are longing for, then what incredible grace to have the possibility of seeing that, of illuminating how you are responsible for creating your own obscurations and perpetuating the play of karma and creating and repeating the play, right? It doesn't matter if you feel absolutely content within the play of separation. Great glory. Be content. Be wholeheartedly separate and content. But don't create misery for yourself by imagining that you want something that you're not getting, right? Just be wholeheartedly in the play of karma, and be in that play of some you win, some you lose, because that's not the truth. The truth is that there is only cause and effect and karma in the play of the projected world, in the dream, that in truth there's complete freedom from that, and alignment with the glory is where that is known. That heaven is in your heart, right? The kingdom of God, the glory is in your heart, and it's to be living in your heart and not in your mind. And access, you have full access to the whole kingdom of God. The whole glorious paradise is right here. And it is just to give yourself access, if that is what you are longing for, and to notice that the misery of hardship or not getting or struggling is all part of the mind's creation out of the human condition that believes in lack, limitation, and not enoughness, right? So we have to have this willingness to really, really want to see through that. And then the willingness to surrender through all of the resistances that will be invited in order to say yes to the glory and not saying yes to the play of karma, right? But to know that the responsibility is with every being, and this is the glory that we have been given. It's not exactly free will in the way that the mind imagines, because the free will, let's say, is kind of on a piece of elastic. It can only go so far. But we're given an imaginary sense of free will, so that we're almost like we're tested to see, what are you aligning with? What are you longing for? What are you saying yes to, right? Of course, what we are in truth is before free will and before destiny, that is all part of the dream. But in order to get out of the dream, we have to use our imagined game card, our free will card, because the free will card is really an invitation to surrender into God, into the glory, into the not knowing, to be the living Almighty yes. That's our free will. Our free will is, what are we saying yes to, right? And so we use our free will card to say yes, 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 to whatever is right here. Yes, okay, yes, this, yes, this, yes, this, yes, this. That we're saying yes to life as life living itself, right? That no one is watching you, no one is judging you. It's all your own internal functioning. You're saying yes to yourself. That's the truth, is that, are you saying yes to yourself? Are you giving yourself the glorious gift of freedom? Are you saying yes to the wonder, the love, and the radiant beauty of knowing yourself and living as the wideness of the open, infinite heart of the glory? Right? The byproduct of being the living Almighty is a divine smile and spontaneous laughter, maybe even some spontaneous tears, right? But it's a contentedness, it's an openness. There's no shame or guilt. There's no dwelling in the story of any of the narrative that the mind wants to create. There's just absolute freedom in this moment. And this is all there is. It's an ever-present now. This is it. This is the glory. This is the holy yes. This is the Almighty yes. Mm. To be lost in wonder, love, and praise, right? Resting in the perfect love. Love divine, light divine, wholeness divine, the purity of the true natural being that has never, ever, ever been anything other than itself, that you have never, ever been anything other than yourself. And here you are, nowhere to get to, nothing to do, just to be yourself, the living almighty yes. Saying yes to yourself, yes to yourself, yes to yourself. There's no confusion here. There's no questioning here. There's no doubt here. There's no second guessing here. There's just the glory shining. Mm. Freedom is here. You are here. The glory is here. Mhm. Mhm. Mhm.